We've got some people on with us live. Happy Saturday, everybody! Welcome to a weekend edition of Flames Nation Live. Pat Steinberg along with you in the home studio today. Gonna give a little bit of a weekend whirl of Flames Nation Live for you. We've got lots to talk about. I know there isn't a whole lot going on right now, but we got lots to talk about. Are we getting closer to start of an NHL season? I certainly hope so. I certainly hope that we're getting close to that. If that is the case, then what are we talking about with the Flames in an all-Canadian division? How are they actually going
Pat, I miss you. I feel
spoiler
guys, I haven't seen Pat in person since July, and both of us wearing masks at that point due to the Phase 3 NHL requirements at the time. So I haven't hugged Pat in probably like a good 9 months, and I'm getting withdrawal.
That's right. Yep, it's we need to be together. It's been way too long since we've all been together. Now, are we getting close? First of all, Mike is the first one to say hi on the comments. So hello to Mike K. Anybody else who's watching, tell us where you're watching from and get your questions in. Always topic ideas as we're doing this live on the chat. But how close are we actually to the start of an NHL season? It sure does feel like maybe there's some momentum, and here we are on December 5th.
Yeah,
maybe in about a month's time,
as Brad for Living often jokes, Pat, it's all we got everything figured out except for term and dollars. In this case, the NHLPA and the NHL are trying to work out the minutia of how things will look and the who's going to get paid what. There's still, I think, based on what we're hearing from folks like Elliot Friedman, there hasn't really been a lot publicly made available about progress about the financial side of things, in terms of there's still going to be hand-wringing about escrow and cash flow, and to be honest, the stuff that sometimes makes fans glaze over when we're just waiting to hear about hockey games. But it's sounding like they're getting a better sense of what this would look like. According to some tweets from Elliot earlier today, it looks like we're going to have something like a 52 or 56 game season, which for the Flames would be played amongst six other teams, the six other Canadian teams in an all-Canadian division. And it's looking like no preseason, a 2-week training camp without exhibition games, and then the games would start. This is the part where we're sort of getting conflicting information from the various insiders. Some of them are saying January 12th, which would be a Tuesday. Some are saying the 15th or 16th would be a Friday, Saturday. Traditionally, the way the NHL does their schedule is they sort of do a soft launch on like a Wednesday or a Thursday night with the national games for our friends at Sportsnet, and then they get into Hockey Night in Canada like a big kit and caboodle on the Saturday. So if I were a betting person, I think that's kind of what the NHL is hoping to do, in terms of it allows you to space out games. You don't have everything as compacted as it is schedule wise. I think they learned a lot from what happened with the return to play scenario, in terms of what worked for broadcasts, what didn't work for broadcasts, and it seems pretty apparent, at least based the world is right now, with Alberta, for example, coming off another day of record new cases, that will probably be starting, barring anything unforeseen, with no fans in the stands, and then they'll probably take it from there. In terms of, I don't think they're going to commit to a season-long situation, in terms of, I don't think on January 12th Gary Bettman's going to come out and say, all right, no fans anywhere all year. But I also don't think they're going to say we're going to have fans 20 games in, 25 games in, because
I think that this is all got to be a rolling thing, right? This has got to be a play it by ear and see how the world how the world adapts and how the world progresses. Like, if we're in a situation by April where things are pretty close to normal again, well then you can have fans in a bunch of markets. If we're not at a point where we're there by May, well, maybe you got to start the playoffs without fans. I think that, and that's what the NHL has done a really good job of throughout all of this. If you go back to the summertime when we were watching the return to play, NHL did a really good job of not committing to anything until they actually had to. They did a really good job of not making their final plans until they had all of the information possibly available to them, and then they made the best call at the time. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. And it's the same thing with fans. So you don't need to commit to having fans right now. I know Elliot Friedman's used the term a path to fans, and that's what owners are looking for, and I understand that because it's a revenue stream and it's an opportunity to make money again. But I think that the fact that there's a possibility of it happening this season is exciting, and I think that we're all kind of the opinion that by the beginning of the next real season, the next full season in 10, 11 months time, when we're in early October, that's going to be the type of NHL season that we're used to, with full travel, with fans in stands, with 82 games, back to the divisions that we're used to. This is a bridge year, and so you have to kind of understand that it's going to be a little bit different.
Well, not precisely the division we're used to, though, because 2021 is going to be a weird year, but for the NHL, 21-22 is going to be kind of a fun year, they hope, because we're going to see the opening night for the Seattle Kraken. They're going to
so the divisions will be a little bit different because Seattle is now part of the Pacific Division for sure.
And I think Arizona, whether or not they're in Houston or where the hell city they're going to play in at any given point, the Coyotes, whichever city is hosting them at that time, will be sort of moved to the Central Division. They'll still be in conference, but they won't be seeing the Flames as often. But yeah, I think everyone's sort of reconciling themselves to the fact that this is going to be weird, but it's going to be weird for a very finite amount of time. The Alberta provincial government, I think last week, released their sort of guidelines for how the vaccine is going to be rolled out. So it's looking like January rollout for the vaccine for I think the phase one they're looking at would be the first 3 months of 2021 will be long-term care workers.
Oh, okay. This is not. We don't need to be a news Twitter account. Come on,
anyway,
Pike. I know that.
But yeah, the idea is
Pike is a. We know him as the director and the curator of Flamesnation.ca. We know him as the extremely on top of everything in Flames World guy on Twitter. Like those are the things that are relevant to this conversation. And then in another life, Pike is also like a big political science guy, and that's what you have that's your undergrad, or do you have your master's in poli-sci?
Both.
So, well, I knew you had your undergrad, but I wasn't sure if you are a master's in poli-sci as well. So, excuse him for going off in political rants every once in a while. He knows about these things as well.
Anyway,
he's a very well-rounded fella.
The gist of it is, vaccine will definitely be widespread by September when we start going for the preseason of 2021, and depending on supplies and all this kind of thing, we could see full crowds for the playoffs. I know if you're the NHL, they're probably hoping that things go well and everything gets sort of back on the rails.
At the very worst, you could probably do like a bubble playoffs and have full crowds there. So you could go somewhere where you're definitely okay. Say that not there's 31 cities. Maybe not all 31 cities are in the same spot come May, but maybe 4 spots are, and you can have 4 bubbles and have full fans in those 4 bubbles. It wouldn't shock me whatsoever if that were to be the case.
And I think that's going to be the encouraging thing. Is like let's be real here. For a lot of people, for many reasons, this has been a damn depressing year. But I think the hope is we're going to sort of see that swing around the other side, where instead of hearing about we spent the majority of 2020 hearing about new trouble spots and sports shutting down, and it's been a miserable year. Hopefully 2021 we'll see, we'll hear more about new clear spots where there are no new cases and people can go back to, going to arenas and stadiums and malls and everything and just, doing what they were doing beforehand. So the NHL is hoping to be a big part of that. We'll see how, like I said, I think they've been really responsible. As weird as it feels for me to be praising Gary Bettman, they've been pretty good with not overpromising. If anything, they've underpromised. And I think that's kind of why the bubble playoffs work so well.
What about Mike, who says on the comments, I really hope they decide to play outdoors so fans can get out to see them live. I know that Elliot Friedman had suggested that earlier in the week, that maybe outdoor playoffs are something that we might be able to see. Not outdoor playoffs, outdoor games in the regular season. And what is it? 4 places we're looking at doing outdoor games on a regular basis.
And I think Pierre LeBrun over the Athletic said 7. So it's probably somewhere between there. I think the cost would be the big thing, because you'd need to run a bunch of games to make the cost worthwhile to really doing that. And
it made sense that LA and Anaheim would be wanting to do it. Like, they're the same city essentially, so you could have them both playing in one spot and have them both do it. So that would be a good from a cost splitting standpoint. So that could work.
Yeah, I honestly, I think, let's be completely honest. Like, not all ownership groups are created equal. Some ownership groups have really taken the teeth and are in markets that are really dependent on local gates. So out of 31 ownership groups, 32 when you include Seattle, Gary Bettman probably has, I don't know, 4 or 5 that are just really uncomfortable for financial reasons participating. And there's probably a few that are sort of on the fence. And if you're these owners, there's revenue sharing, and I think doing what you can to drum up a bit of revenue here and there to sort of help ease them through this process. I know no one wants to feel bad for people who have enough spare change to own sports teams, but it's not like anyone's sitting on like a Scrooge McDuck money bin at this point in 2020. Like, it's been a rough year all around to various degrees. So I think it'd be a creative, clever idea, and we'll see how it looks, because I know there's probably some concern about diluting the Heritage Classic or Winter Classic or Stadium Series branding. But on the other hand, if you got some owners who are potentially rebelling against what Bettman wants to do, it's a nice favor to throw to them.
Wow. And it's also a bridge season. Like, do things differently to get a season. And I think everybody, like, for instance, what is popping up on your screen right now, an all-Canadian division is going to be part of this new season whenever it starts, January 13th, January 15th, January 20th, whatever, 52, 56, 48. They will be different looking divisions. This is from Daily Faceoff, our sister site, and they put this graphic up with the 4 different divisions. Look at the green division, the Eastern Division. Now, this is not confirmed, but this is kind of what we're rumored. And look how close everything is in that green division, and look at how spread out it is in the yellow division, the Canadian division or the Northern Division. And we all understand why, Pike. It's because we don't know when the border is going to reopen. We don't know when it's going to be easy to cross the U.S.-Canada border without different restrictions and quarantines and all that type of stuff. So an all-Canadian division is going to be a part of this, and it is going to be part of the 21 season. And it leads to a really interesting conversation, because I believe when you look at the 7 teams in this division, I believe that there is very little separating the 7 teams. Maybe Ottawa's the clear 7. Maybe the Senators are the worst team, and that's clear. But the rest of it, from west to east, like if you're talking Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Toronto, Montreal, I see very little separating those 6 teams. I think you can make an argument that any one of those 6 teams is the best team of the division or could win the division. And I think that you could be looking at some of the most entertaining divisional play that we've seen. Not to mention the rivalries and the potential murders that could happen in 10 or 9 meetings between the Flames and the Oilers, but just like the actual hockey itself, I think could be absolutely amazing, because we're talking about very little separating 6 of the 7 teams. I couldn't give you a really good feel as to who would win that division. So where do the Flames stack up with the rest of a proposed all-Canadian division?
I have Toronto at the top. I have Ottawa in the basement, and then I have a whole bunch of teams in the middle who could go to 6th, they could go to 5th, they could go to 2nd. Like, and I think that's the, like you were saying, that's the exciting part, because let's be honest, until recently, the Battle of Alberta has been like the Flames' main blood feud, but they've had in the playoffs very recently, and in the regular season, some really entertaining back and forth games with a really young and entertaining Vancouver Canucks club. And it just so happens the Flames have 3 to 5 guys on their team now who are intimately familiar with the Vancouver Canucks. I don't think we expected the preliminary round series against the Jets in the qualifying round to really turn into as nasty and bitter a series as that ended up being. But that's going to bleed through to the regular season. Toronto has always been a team that's been exciting for the Flames to play with or without fans because there's so much personal connection between a lot of the Flames personnel and the city of Toronto. Montreal, you're going to have potentially like the 2 best jersey sets in the league up against each other 6, 7, 8 times in the next regular season. Ottawa might surprise some people. I still don't think they're very good, but they could surprise some people. So like there could potentially, like, Ottawa might not be the most entertaining matchup, but you have the Kachuk brothers against each other. Like, there's just going to be so much stuff to pay attention to in every series. There'll be like mini playoff series sort of interspersed throughout the season because there's going to be so much, familiarity with each other. It's going to be great.
And I'm not even 100% ready to say that for sure Toronto's the best of the 7 teams. I mean, I think in terms of big name talent and how much time they get on national networks, they're the number 1 team of the 7. But like I like a lot of their young talent. I think Marner and Matthews are superstar hockey players, and I think that the signing of Brody will help them. But I still can't sit here and say that they are clearly better than Vancouver or Calgary or Edmonton or even I don't know what direction Montreal is going long term, but for this next season or 2, I think they're going to be significantly better. So just it's tough for me to even say there's a definitive number 1 team of the 7 that would be in there. Maybe a definitive 7, but I'm not even sure that I can be totally on board with you that for sure Toronto is the team. And so I guess from a Flames fan perspective, like you go into every game knowing that you've got a battle on your hands. You probably go into games with, say they play 56. You go into the final 15 games of the season and you're probably talking about 6 points separating 5 or 6 teams for top spot in that division. And then you get an all divisional playoffs for the first 2 rounds. Like it's not perfect. I don't want to see it long term. I don't want this to be in perpetuity, but for 1 year, I think it could be really fun.
Yeah. And honestly, I think we talk about how closely knit these teams are in terms of how close they are talent-wise. I think this could be a year. I know, the analytics community is always sort of very skeptical about the impact coaching can have in hockey. And, I think long-term, if all things being equal, the most talented team usually wins. I don't think coaching can really elevate a team that much. But when you're playing against so many of the same teams in so many, in close succession, I think, line matchups, little things that coaches can do over the season could make a huge difference given how close the standing is going to be. So, potentially this is going to be a tremendously entertaining season, but it's going to be a huge test of organizational depth across different teams. It's going to be a huge test of, focus, and it's going to be a huge test of each team's coaching staff in terms of, whose video team and whose coaching staff can get them, prepped for the next game and say, here's what you need to do to beat Toronto. Okay, well, forget about that because here's what you need to do to beat Edmonton. Okay, forget about that. And they're going to have to reset constantly. And I think it's going to be just a huge test for everybody involved.
So Jimmy says, okay, got to give your top 3 in the Canadian division. Put it on the line. I'll give you a second to think. I saw the comment, so I'll go first. I would go number 1. I think because of the depth and the goaltending, I would go 1 Calgary, not by a huge margin, but I would say by like a slight edge. Calgary 1, Toronto 2, Edmonton 3. Would be my top 3 teams in the All-Canadian division, at least on paper, knowing that things can go completely the opposite of on paper. But I go Calgary 1, Toronto 2, Edmonton 3.
Swap 1 and 2 for me. I have Toronto 1, but not by a lot, then Calgary, then Edmonton. And like if it's the top 4 make the playoffs, like my on paper playoff teams are Toronto, or I think Vancouver would be my 4th team. So those 4 teams in the postseason, And I don't think anyone's going to be free and clear. I think there's going to be some jockeying until the very last weekend of the season, and then I think we're going to see some like based on my patchwork schedule. It's what Calgary Edmonton in the first round. You would have Toronto Edmonton in the first round. That would be that'd be awesome. I'd watch that. Like you want to see Austin Matthews versus McDavid and Draisaitl for 7 games? I'd sign up for that today.
Josh says all Canadian division would be awesome. I'm fine with a season without fans in the stands. I love the playoffs without them. They should do like the other leagues and sell seats for relatively cheap to put your face in a chair and give that money to charities. They didn't do that in the NHL. They had kind of like the fans on the screen thing, but they haven't done the fans in the seats thing. But who knows what they'll do, especially because I would expect that they will be doing games in arenas. I would expect that we're not going to be talking about the bubble situation until the playoffs if they need to go down that road. NBA's playing in buildings. Major League Baseball did it. The NFL is doing it. I would imagine that the NHL would follow suit and would just have home games being played, which might actually mean the return to covering live hockey for you at iPike. It might actually mean we'll be able to cover games from a building once again, which would be quite the adjustment. I'm so used to watching things and covering things on Zoom and from afar. It would be quite the adjustment all of a sudden.
Yeah, and for just some inside baseball for folks. The NHL did, from a media standpoint, the NHL did everything they during the bubble playoffs. It was weird for media because we're very used to sort of like sitting like 2 inches from someone and sort of being like, "Hello, Chris Versteeg, tell me your life story," for example. We obviously, for various reasons, everything's been had to do over Zoom during the postseason. There was no face-to-face access with anyone who was considered. I think there was tier 1 and we were tier 5 or something. So anyone who is a player or who had direct access to players, we had no direct access to because it made a lot of sense. And I imagine what the stuff we're going to be doing is going to be very similar to what we did during the playoffs, at least to start, and then we'll see how it goes. But I think they managed it really well. Like it was not business as usual for anyone, but I think the NHL comp staff and the Flames comp staff, who Pat and I know very well, I was kind of blown away at how relatively seamless it was given the weird circumstances. So if we're signing up for another 2-3 months of that, and then we're going to open it up a little bit more, then I'm on board. It'll be a lot of fun, and it'll be a lot of fun to be back in that building again.
Mike says, I think the Flames have the best interchangeable depth in the NHL. I don't know if I'm quite there in the league. I think Tampa, even with some of the departures they're going to need to make, I think the Lightning are as ridiculously deep a team as you're going to find. I think there's some other Vegas probably. What's that?
Boston's up there too.
Boston would be in there. In the All-Canadian division, though, I would say that the Flames don't have the best high-end talent, and we're I think lacking confidence in what the best players do in the playoffs. That is very true when it comes to this Flames team. From a depth perspective, though, yeah, I think they're probably from a line 1 through 4, at least at forward. I'm not as sure on the blue line anymore, but at least lines 1 through 4, probably the deepest forward group in a Canadian division. Like their fourth line is probably better than what Edmonton or Toronto or Vancouver is going to roll out, and so I think that's probably fair to say. I think Edmonton and Toronto have the best high-end forward talent in the Canadian division, and that definitely the thing that, like Edmonton, had they not lost their final game, had they not played that final game on I remember I was at Hudson's in Shaughnessy. We were doing a promotion with the radio station, and I believe it was the Jets and the Oilers that were playing, and the Oilers lost their final game. We all knew that the NHL was shutting down, and we all knew it was coming. And there you are. There's the Oilers losing to the Jets, and that knocked them out of being in the top 4 and into the preliminary round, and thus put them at risk to losing to Chicago, which they eventually did. So as much as we like to make fun of the Oilers for not being able to actually make the playoffs, which was fun, don't get me wrong, They actually, like, they were having a pretty good season last year. I worry about that goaltending. It's why I can't put the Oilers into my number one spot. I worry about Smith and Koskinen as your goaltending tandem. They literally missed out on every big fish that was out there in the most wide open goaltending market in the history of free agency. They missed out on Crawford and Holtby and Markstrom, so on and so forth. And I just don't know how confident you can be with Smith and Koskinen as your duo next year.
And honestly, I think one of the, like, we'll probably get into this in more depth when we have more time to sort of stretch our legs a bit. The thing that's kind of cool to me about the Canadian division is you sort of see a lot of different team building philosophies. You know, it's great to have elite players. No one's ever going to cry about having elite players. Elite players are awesome to have, but you got to pay them like elite players. And if you have a McDavid or a Draisaitl or a Matthews or etc., they're going to command a lot of money. And in a flat cap system, if you're going to throw a lot of money at 2 or 3 guys, like the Toronto Maple Leafs are paying what, 4 guys $40 million combined? That's kind of insane to me. Like, granted, it's insane to me because I've come up in this market where we joked about for a while, and I still think it's sort of a thing, the Giordano cap, because Brad Treliving came in and he's like, okay, my best player is my captain, so we're going to pay him the most, and if you're going to try to get paid more than the captain, you have to prove you're better than him. And that has kind of worked because look at the 2 players who get paid this as much or slightly more than Mark Giordano, former Norris Trophy winner, are what,
Gaudreau and Tkachuk,
who almost had 100 points 2 years ago and has been outside of last year sort of one of the most dangerous offensive players in the league, and Matthew Tkachuk, who's not as dangerous as he is offensively, but is probably I venture to say a better all-around player. He's a better all-situations player than Gaudreau is, but Gaudreau is probably dangerous offensively.
That is an accurate statement.
But so the Flames are paying what, their 4 best players are combined less than 20 something million, because let's see, 777 is 21. They're paying significantly less than $30 million for their 4 best players. So they have more money to throw at goaltenders or throw, the reason the Edmonton Oilers couldn't go get Jacob Markstrom, for example, is they didn't have the cap space to throw at Jacob Markstrom to do it. Same with Toronto. There's a lot of teams that really would have liked Jacob Markstrom, Vancouver being one of them, and Jacob Markstrom had an idea of what he thought he was worth based on what other guys had thought.
The Canucks could have done that. They just decided not to. They could have found the way to make it happen, but they were worried about Thatcher Demko being lost in expansion and all that type of stuff. And I get it to an extent, but I don't know. And it all depends on what Braden Holtby's going to be in Vancouver. If Holtby can be a 1A to Thatcher's 1B or vice versa, then maybe they're fine.
But it's the mystery box, man. Like, I am a big fan of Markstrom as a goalie, and I don't know what Thatcher Demko is because he's so young and he's had a few pretty good like, I'm not gonna rag on him as a goalie, but you and I are both old enough to remember Jim Carrey. For those of you who are young and have joy in your hearts, Jim Carrey, not the actor, Carrey with 1 R, was a exceptionally good goaltender for the Washington Capitals for like a year. He came in at like 22 or 23 years old, was lights out for like a year and a half, and then completely fell off a cliff because goalies are weird and things can just happen to.
Did he not win? Didn't he win a Calder Trophy?
He won a Calder Trophy. He was a Vezina candidate the second year, and then he just fell off a cliff. And I think he went from Calder to out of the league in 3.5 seasons, which is kind of ridiculous. But like that's the risk you use. And with Markstrom, you kind of know what Markstrom is. He's played long enough that you kind of know what he is. There's a book on him. I think the Flames are fairly comfortable, at least right now, where if they get the worst case Markstrom, they think he'll be good. If they get best case Markstrom, he could win the Vezina, and I think they're comfortable with that. But if you're Vancouver, what if Demko isn't what you think he's going to be? What if Demko is just good? What if he's just average? Then be like, it was such a tough decision to make, but I would have banked on the guy who's been already, what he is like. But I don't know, like Seattle's going to have a lot of goaltenders to decide between, so there's going to be no shortage of goaltenders available come July. Let's say July. Come July.
June, July, whenever. Couple more. We'll go rapid fire through some of these comments. Mike from our friend at Flamesnation and the Blasty Cast. Mike is wondering what you're sipping, Pike. What do you have? What are you? What do you got there? Is that
I have the
Starbucks
vanilla frappuccino.
Oh, okay. I've got a nice, I believe it's jasmine tea is what I'm currently sipping. Josh says, guys, I don't worry so much about the Oilers goaltending in such a short season. I'd actually put the Oilers one spot above Calgary in the ranking in a short season. Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary. I mean, look, the Oilers with that same goaltending were probably going to finish ahead of the Flames in the regular season last year, and that's what the power of McDavid and Draisaitl as two Hart Trophy candidates are going to give you. So it's not completely out of the question. I do worry about that goaltending in Edmonton. Maybe I'm giving the position too much credit in a regular season, a short regular season, but that does worry me. And they didn't improve it. It's status quo from last year. Here's a good one from Jimmy. Says, do you guys have Nestorov in the top 6D or Shillington? I'm not convinced of Shillington, and with no preseason, what do you do? Well, Shillington hasn't even signed yet, so that also needs to happen. Before anything, they probably should sign Shillington. Nestorov, I think, is in their plans only because they went out, they signed him. Brad Treliving has spoken pretty glowingly about him. And they said right from the get-go, they kind of see him, Pike, is playing on the right side because he's played extensively on the right side over the last little bit. Unless they go out and get another right side defenseman, Eric Chernak, anybody? That's my big one. I'm all for them getting Eric Chernak.
They have a right side defenseman. His name is Juuso Valimaki.
But he's another one of your right side defenseman with a left shot. I'm talking. Go get Eric Chernak. He could be the best defenseman on the team. And I know it's not necessarily that easy. But do you see Nestorov in the top 6? Is Nestorov written in as an everyday guy for you?
I honestly, if I were the coach, and as of right now I'm not, if I were the coach, I'd probably until somebody really separates themselves of the group, I would just rotate through Shillington and Nestorov and sort of basically, you have to. Nestorov is trying to reestablish himself in the NHL, and so he was willing to take a pennies on the dollar contract to come here with a chance to play. And if you're Shillington, you're gonna be waiver eligible and on a show me contract probably. Like he's gonna get short term and very close to league minimum because there's not a lot of money left in the system to do anything more than that. So if you're Shillington, you're auditioning for a job here or a job on Seattle or wherever else. So I think putting those two in a situation saying, boys, you figure out who's going to play between the two of you, and it's going to be whoever plays better in games. I think they're both going to play something like 30 games, and we're going to see potentially one of them really, really separate themselves.
Still would have been better, I think, if they would have brought back Brody, but that's another conversation. He was gone fairly early in free agency, and from what I understand, it made his decision pretty early on in free agency, so it was probably never realistic. Here's a couple of things. So what do we got going on at Flames Nation right now? We've got the top 20 prospects countdown is done. We've done our wrap up on that. Juuso Valimaki was named the #1 prospect in the Flames organization. So that is now done. We're now counting down the top 20 stories of 2020. Is that what we're on right now from a countdown perspective?
Yeah, and we're also working on the Reasonable Expectation series where we're looking at the Flames who are going to be on the roster, the guys we think are going to be on the main roster. So that's like 22 human beings at this point, 22 guys, and we're figuring out what's reasonable to expect from these guys. I mean, can Mark Giordano battle Father Time for another year? Can Chris Tanev, keep himself together with duct tape, glue, and grit to play a full season for the first time in 4 years? Can Markstrom be a Vezina guy again? Because he basically kicked the door down and was put himself firmly in that conversation. And, if the Flames are a team that wins the division or is in that conversation, he's going to get a lot of Vezina attention. So stuff like that, we're trying to set the bar appropriately for all these gentlemen, and not everyone's in the same situation. Some of them are petting UFAs. Some of them could be going to Seattle. Some of them could be signing long-term deals here. Some of them are Sam Bennett, who we're not really sure if he's in the Seattle pile or the long-term pile at this point. That's up to him probably.
Plus, we'll have countdown. We'll have Christmas stuff. We'll have we'll have. I always do my top 5 moments of the prior calendar year. It's going to be a little thinner this year because we've missed October, November, December. We've missed 3 months of hockey now. So or we will have missed 3 months of hockey. So
the highlight of my year was I've covered my first road trip, and I ran into Brad Treliving in the press box, and he took one look at me and asked me if I was allowed to leave Alberta.
I still don't know. That they should have put a mandatory quarantine in for you prior to COVID. That should.
Well, I get back from the road trip, and like 3 weeks later, we got a pandemic. I mean,
I was literally in Florida as it was starting. Like I was there in early March covering the Flames.
Because guys were on the.
I was not being socially distanced at some of those places in downtown Miami or Miami Beach. So, yeah, that also was a thing. So, like literally a week later after we got home, the season stopped. So that's kind of the way. It's kind of the way this whole thing went. Hey, hopefully we are back and seeing live hockey in about a month's time. Stay tuned to flamesnation.ca for all of the latest news on that. Follow us on the socials in the bottom right. You can follow Pike on Instagram and Twitter. I've got my socials up in the top right if you want to follow along as well. Big show goes 1 till 6 every weekday on Sportsnet 960. I've got one more week of holidays, so we'll do there's not enough to be doing 2 of these a week right now. When there starts to get more news, we'll do 2 of these a week, but we'll be back with you sometime next week with another edition of Flames Nation Live. Be safe, everybody, especially you, Pike. Watch out for yourself, hey?
Yeah, and hopefully the next time we chat like this, we'll have news, as in
let's have some actual news.
We'll have a start date. We might have a schedule potentially. Like the misery might be behind us, folks. Not completely, but fingers crossed. The misery of having no hockey and no long-term health prognosis for everybody will be behind us before too long. We're getting there.
Thanks for all your comments. Thanks for watching live, and we'll be back with you sometime next week for another edition of Flames Nation Live. For Pike, I'm Steinberg. Have a great weekend. Be safe, stay safe, be well. Thank you, everybody.